The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today we're going to take a little bit of a pause from the facts on the ground in Ukraine with the Russian invasion of the Crimean Peninsula and talk a little bit about the crazy that's coming out of the woodwork as a result of what's going on in Ukraine. Now, we alluded yesterday a little bit to this, talking about Sarah Palin saying she made good on her prediction and she's this great foreign policy expert because you can see Russia from her house in Alaska. But Paul Ryan is saying something that's even more outrageous. And Paul Ryan was on CNN. And he was being interviewed by CNN's Kate Baldwin yesterday, and he suggested that there's a really simple way for President Obama to solve the crisis in Ukraine. And why it's up to President Obama to solve, I don't know, but Paul Ryan thinks that it is. And he says the way to do it is for President Obama to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. Watch this.
What can Congress do? The president, the administration considering sanctions that it can do without an act of Congress. But what can Congress do realistically?
Well, I think we should move forward on natural gas exports very quickly. I think we should approve an LNG terminal on the East Coast to go to Europe. I think we should approve the Keystone pipeline. I think we should show that the U.S. is going to be moving forward on becoming energy independent and supplying energy to Europeans.
Moving forward with the Keystone pipeline, that development would take years, though, to actually make that happen.
The signal, Kate, the signal that is America is open for energy business, and America is going to be helping our allies with energy resources so that they can be less dependent on Russian energy resources. The signal is very, very important, and I think showing that this is going to make us move in that direction helps give our allies the kind of resources they need and reduces Russia's grip on this.
The Keystone XL pipeline will create 35 to 50 permanent American jobs. It will not lower fuel prices. It will not reduce our dependence on Middle East oil. The U.S. Defense Department is actually preparing for global chaos if climate change continues to wreak havoc on the planet. And climate scientists think that Keystone XL will contribute to that. It's also not a safe way to transport oil across our country. It really won't pump much money into the American economy. And the obvious thing is that the oil itself is coming from Canada. As far as I know, Lewis, I don't know if Texas textbooks have gotten this crazy, but Canada isn't the United States.
And it's not Russia either. Right. And he says this will send a message. Well, what message is it going to send?
Well, it'll send the message in 10 years when this is finally up and running. Although Paul Ryan said it would send a signal, even if it would do nothing for years and years.
Right, a signal to Putin in Russia. You know, I was unaware that the majority of our natural resources are coming from Russia, David.
Well, it is true that Russia provides much oil to different parts of the world, including Europe. So it's kind of like this convoluted thing where to believe Paul Ryan, you have to believe that, number one, this is all President Obama's both responsibility and the onus is on President Obama for him to solve this. Number two, that European countries would be less likely to ally with Russia if we provide them an alternate fossil fuel source. They will make that connection. It's an incredibly convoluted thing. Really what it is just Paul Ryan taking yet another opportunity to link anything that's going on around the world to trying to get this Keystone XL pipeline pushed through. That's all this is.
Yeah, and perhaps looking towards the next election where these big oil companies will help fund his campaign.
On the other hand, we have the religious conservatives pointing to Ukraine as what else but the end of times, the apocalypse, the rapture, the end times. This is Pastor John Hagee, and he was on the Hagee hotline yesterday. And he spent most of the time on the Hagee hotline talking to his viewers about how the current crisis in the Ukraine is clearly a precursor to the invasion of Israel as foretold by the book of Ezekiel, which will usher in the last days. The last days is yet another way of talking about the rapture, the apocalypse, or the return of Jesus, or whatever you want to call it. And Hagee explained about Ezekiel 38 and so many other things. Here's his message, more or less.
Come up against my people, Israel, like a cloud to cover the land. It will be in the last days. That's right now. What you are seeing happening on the television screen is the Russian bear coming back to life, wanting to be a global superpower, It's going to take all of the nations it can with him, and there will be, at some point in the future, a land invasion led by the Russians. The prophet Ezekiel very clearly says Iran, the Arabic nations, Libya, Germany, Turkey are coming together under the leadership of Russia. You see that happening right now. They're going to come like a cloud to descend on the nation of Israel, and God is going to destroy 5 out of 6 of them.
This again? How many times have we heard this in the last few days? Everything seems to be the beginning of the end times right now.
Yeah, I mean, how many different people have we heard say that this incident is the beginning of the end times? This one's the beginning of the end times. I mean, it's probably been happening for 1,000 years at this point.
This goes beyond the need for any kind of nuanced and deep analysis. It's really just odd that people do believe this stuff, and they say, look at what's happening in Ukraine. This is clearly the mark of the beast, and we're going to soon, people will be raptured soon. There are people who actually think about that. And what's next? Pat Robertson's hangnail is clearly the sign of the impending apocalypse.
Yeah. I mean, I could understand perhaps people thinking World War II was the beginning of the end times. But this, I don't think we've reached that level yet.
No, I don't think we're there. And also, when Harold Camping, remember when Harold Camping was saying this was about to happen and people need to be ready, people started actually making preparations for the end of the world, under the guise that if they are raptured and go to heaven, they don't really have a use for their physical bodies anymore. And if the rapture happens and they don't go to heaven, they wouldn't want to live anyway because it means that they didn't make it into heaven. And people start making day-to-day preparations. It's incredibly damaging. And I'd actually be curious what portion of believers subscribe to these kind of end times beliefs. I don't know what the number would be.
Yeah, hard to say. We did interview that woman, too, about this, who believed that something like a day or two after our interview with her, it was going to be the end of the world. And of course, after that day passed, she was nowhere to be found.
Yeah, we couldn't get a hold of her. She was a follower of Harold Camping's. I forget her name. Recently, her name came up talking to someone. Here's something interesting related to the recent fetal heartbeat bill, anti-abortion bill that passed in Alabama, 73 to 29. There's an Alabama lawmaker who was involved in the negotiation over this bill, and he said that his Republican colleagues would change their anti-abortion positions if their daughters were impregnated by black men. This is State Representative Alvin Holmes, a Montgomery Democrat, and he made the comments during a debate on the bill that would ban abortions. I'm going to play the audio for you. There was not that much of a reaction in the crowd. This is the argument that Representative Alvin Holmes made for his for his colleagues in the House.
If you ask the people in here now to raise their hand, that those who are against abortion, 99% of all of the white people in here gonna raise their hands that they are against abortion. On the other hand, 99% of the whites that are sitting in here now, if their daughter got pregnant by a black man, they gonna make their daughter have an abortion.
So that's the gist of it. I like how you also hear it's someone typing. Maybe it's like the record keeper who's putting this incredible testimony into the record for the congressional record. He also went on to recount a conversation with a woman who did oppose abortion but intended to pressure her daughter into having an abortion because a black man impregnated her. It is actually quite true that many, many anti-abortion women have abortions, and when you ask them about it, in every case it's the same explanation, which is that their specific case was different or in some way justified the abortion, but in all other cases and as a general rule of law, we should be making abortions difficult to have and making it illegal. And racists will, of course, wholeheartedly deny the claims that are being made here, but there is absolutely no question that there is an element of truth to that. Now, am I saying all people who are against abortion would be for it in the case of a black baby? Absolutely not. But does that situation exist? No question. I've talked to people who say that.
Right. this is, of course, slightly outrageous, but there is some truth in it. And I guarantee you could find a reason for just about any person, if they were put into a certain situation, any person who is against abortion, put in the right circumstances, they would be for it.
Right. For some people, it may be if the child is going to be half black. For other people, it may be if they were the victims of rape, for example, or other reasons we could come up with. The idea, though, that he's talking about here is nobody is suggesting exemptions for if you were raped or otherwise impregnated by a black man. But at the same time, the issue of even in cases of rape and incest, we have politicians who are against legal abortions, even when there is a case of rape and incest. And that is incredibly dangerous. This black baby scenario is, while true for some people, mostly a distraction. And I think we really need to be focusing on the fact that there are right-wingers who oppose abortion, a legal and safe medical procedure that shouldn't even really involve elected officials, even when the victim has been raped or is underage.
Yeah, it's it just should not be part of political discourse at all. Unfortunately, we really can't separate these social issues, can we?
No, certainly can't. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Democrat from Nevada, is saying that the country is addicted to Coke. And he means, of course, the Koch brothers. He's continuing his assault on the conservative brothers who fund so much stuff in the American political system. He called on Charles and David Koch to, or he called them un-American. He said, what is un-American is when shadowy billionaires pour unlimited money into our democracy to rig the system to benefit themselves and the wealthiest 1%. He went on to say, I believe in an America where economic opportunity is open to all, but based on their actions and the policies they promote, the Koch brothers seem to believe in an America where the system is rigged to benefit the very wealthy. Well, yeah, obviously they believe that. He also accused the Republican Party of selling out to the Kochs, and he says Senate Republicans are addicted to Coke. Coke Company President and COO Philip Ellender actually responded to Harry Reid and said, this topic is worthy of vigorous dialogue and civil debate between people who exercise mutual respect for others with opposing viewpoints. We're disappointed that Senator Reid is attacking private citizens rather than the problems facing this nation. This is so funny. The problems facing this nation are in great part related to the disproportionate power that so-called private citizens have. I think that Harry Reid is spot on. It is, of course, the legal system, the campaign finance system, and our system of plutocracy that gives these private citizens the power. But the idea that, hey, Charles and David Koch are just individuals. They're not part of the problem at all. Well, they're a huge representation of the problem, which is enabled, of course, by the legal and financial system, which their money helps to modify.
Right, and they can hide behind their companies and their big conglomerates and their political action committees and all of that. But the root of the problem really is these individuals who have lobbying power and who have billions of dollars and who basically just can make these senators and congressmen do whatever they want.
And I agree. It's not about Charles and David Koch as people, right? But we can't ignore the fact that the political system allows them this amount of control. The fact that they have this amount of control allows them to influence the political system, which in turn is what gives them the control. There is no way you can honestly say that individuals like them, even if it's not specifically, but for illustrative purposes, should be off the table. We need to be using them because they are so indicative of the problems in this country. Let's take a break. We're going to talk about so many more things today. I'll also be interviewing Michael Glatz, who is formerly a homosexual. You're not going to want to miss that.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com, which is your best source for unbiased news, because no matter what liberals say, if we allow same-sex marriage, the next obvious step is men marrying trains. No question about it. Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's member of the day is Loretta Smith. Loretta, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Join Loretta as a member and get a free t-shirt if you go to davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. Epic news from Pope Francis. Now, I want to remind you, this is not cheerleading the incredible openness and pro-equality points of view of Pope Francis or the Catholic Church. But this is big news. Pope Francis has signaled that he could see the Catholic Church tolerating, and I get that that's a pretty low bar, some forms of same-sex civil unions, but not marriage, especially when it comes to situations like medical care and property for gay couples. He said this in an interview with an Italian daily publication, and the Pope said, matrimony is between a man and a woman, but moves to regulate diverse situations of cohabitation are driven by the need to regulate economic aspects among persons, as for instance, to assure medical care. This is not an endorsement of same-sex marriage, and we shouldn't be jumping up and down in joy, but the reality is this is a huge step for the Catholic Church to be considering, and even if you think the Catholic Church should have no influence, pragmatically speaking, it does, over 1 billion Catholics, and the Church taking a position like this, if it becomes the kind of general position of the Church, is huge.
Yeah, this is exactly what we talked about a day or two ago. Maybe it was longer than that. But in order for the Church to survive, it's going to have to adapt and change and update its views, its policies. And we're starting to see that now. Even
the word tolerable for civil unions is not really even that tolerant and open. I understand that. But this is a big step. And there was an interview over the summer where the Pope also said, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Which is completely obvious. I mean, no question about it. So certainly an important statement from Pope Francis, although still one that is very, very far from being truly pro-equality. But it's a step in the right direction. Not too interested in equality was a passenger who left a note for a female pilot saying that the Bible makes clear that the cockpit of a commercial airplane is no place for a woman. This is a Canadian airline pilot who was shocked after getting a note from a passenger. This is WestJet pilot Carrie Stacey, who told CTV that crews were just cleaning the aircraft after a flight from Calgary to Victoria, and they found a note from a passenger named David written on a napkin. The cockpit of an airliner is no place for a woman. A woman being a mother is the most honor, not as captain. P.S. I wish WestJet could tell me a fair lady is at the helm so I can book another flight. Yeah. So, of course, this is ridiculous. The Bible is, I didn't know of it as the definitive authority on the subject of commercial aviation, but maybe I missed Aviation's chapter 7, verse 47.
David, the Bible is the definitive authority on everything. You just need to know exactly where to find it and how to warp it.
Let's, for a second, though, Lewis, buy into the internal logic of this whole thing, where we momentarily accept that we should be paying attention to religious texts and what they say about modern humans and women having different jobs. Even if we go to the religious texts, as usual, fundamentalists are only cherry-picking what's most useful to them, because if you look at some of the other if you look at Proverbs 31, 16, 18, and 24, she considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. She perceiveth that the merchandise is good. She maketh linen garments and selleth them, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. It sounds like that is telling women that they should be entrepreneurial and be doing more than just, what was it the guy said? Being a mother in the home. So to be honest, I don't care about Proverbs 31, 16, 18, 24, or 152. It makes no difference to me. But for people who do, shouldn't you stop cherry picking individual lines to make points you want?
Yeah, something tells me that this guy is a big fan of Phyllis Schlafly. Although, Phyllis Schlafly's work is not, I don't really think it's Bible based.
Well, I guess she's not. You know what? I think on our show, she doesn't really do much Bible talk, but on other shows, Phyllis Schlafly does do Bible-based evangelism type stuff. Brian Fisher loves the American Constitution, or at least he claims to. It's one of his top priorities. He figures out ways to interpret and reinterpret it so that he can continue to be bigoted against gay people and other groups. However, he came out with this gem saying that the Fifth Amendment is pleading the Fifth, taking the Fifth, invoking your Fifth Amendment right not to testify against yourself is an admission of guilt. This was related to Lois Lerner, the former IRS official, pleading the Fifth this week when brought in for congressional hearings about the IRS. And Brian Fisher said the following.
In reality, what Lois Lerner is doing by citing the Fifth Amendment, she is admitting that she's guilty. She, not legally, but morally, she is admitting that she's guilty. She is admitting that the IRS is guilty of sin by refusing to answer any of these questions. Here's what Amendment 5 of the Constitution says. Let's see, get back to the subject here. No person shall be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. You cannot be compelled, and this is a good part of the Constitution. I'm happy it's in there. I'm not saying we ought to change it. No person can be compelled to be a witness against himself. So what is Lois Lerner admitting when she invokes the Fifth? She is admitting that if she speaks the truth, she will be a witness against herself.
Either Brian Fisher doesn't understand the Constitution or he's deliberately being misleading about it, because invoking the Fifth Amendment is a refusal to testify on the grounds that it may incriminate you, including because, for example, your testimony might be incorrectly perceived and you might condemn yourself when you don't mean to. The perfect example of this is there's a video where a defense attorney tells you, and police actually agree with him, that you should never talk to police. Let's say police want to question you about somebody who was killed in Boston, Massachusetts. And you say you live in New York City. For some reason, they're questioning you. You know that you didn't kill anybody, so you say, of course, I'll help them. Why wouldn't I? You start talking to the police, and it turns out that you say, oh, you know what? I was in Boston, Massachusetts that night, and blah, blah, blah. And they say, oh, well, the murder happened in Boston, Massachusetts, but we hadn't told you that yet. And then you say, oh, yeah, no, but I was there, I don't know. And now you're all disheveled, and you say, I was there Friday to Sunday. And then they say, oh, well, the killing actually happened on Monday, yeah. But then later it turns out you were so flustered that you didn't remember you were there on Monday. Now you're lying to police. And you see how this can happen. So the idea that just not talking, not testifying is an indication of guilt is completely anti-constitutional. So again, Brian Fisher, who is an absolute constitutional fetishist, here either ignorant or deliberately misleading people about the Constitution.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know how you can just make a broad blanket statement like that. Anyone who pleads the Fifth is admitting guilt. It's completely absurd.
We'll take a break. Back with Michael Glatz after this. He used to be gay. He isn't anymore.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Michael Glatz. He's a pastor in Wyoming. In a previous life, he was co-founder of Young Gay America. He was a former advocate for gay rights. You received some coverage, Michael, when you publicly announced that you were no longer identifying as gay. So I kind of want to just walk through your life, essentially, if we can, so to maybe give people a better or more direct understanding of your past. So let's go back to the very beginning, if we can. What was your early life like growing up? And maybe you can give us a sense of what your sexual attraction was at that time.
Sure. I guess, I guess first off, thanks for having me. And, just right off the bat, I want to say, before we go any further, is I'm mostly here to sort of acknowledge my own part in a lot of hurt and pain that has been caused to a lot of folks. And so I just want to put that out there first. I'm kind of hoping that maybe you and me talking today is an opportunity for me to kind of step away from even discourse around sexuality. It's something that Wayne Beeson and I had talked about earlier. And, his comments to me were, you don't really need to be sort of in the spotlight talking about this stuff all the time, because, it's not really very helpful. And I had to think about that, and I thought, well, I'm not going to not answer your question, David, but, if I think back to my own life, it's like, well, why is my life any more interesting than anybody else's? Everybody's identity develops in a unique way inside of that individual. And I think for me, I've been so steeped in identity politics over the last 20 years that I'm actually kind of interested in getting out of it. So
well, I think that it's I think it's a good, I think that a good way to get out of that would be if first we dissociate from all the political stuff of Republicans and Democrats and all that stuff, and just kind of give people a sense of, if you think back, do you remember at your earliest childhood having attractions to men, women, both?
Yeah, I would say both. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And then as you started to develop, maybe when you were a teenager, or I don't know whenever the point was where you pursued relationships, were those relationships pursued with men, women, or both?
Well, I pursued relationships with girls in high school, and then also I was feeling attraction towards guys at the same time. So there was a lot of confusion. I was in high school in the 90s, early 90s, and so it was a different time politically and culturally. Also, I had a bit of a sort of a Christian upbringing, not a strict Christian upbringing, but leanings in that way. And so there was some shame involved in obviously the same-sex attractions that I had. So, but then my parents died young, and so it kind of, when I was young, my parents died, and so it kind of gave me, I guess, a freedom, so to speak, to explore, if you want to call it that. And so it wasn't until I was at college that I got involved with another man for the first time.
So you had what I think is maybe about a 10-year relationship with a man, and at a certain point you decided that well, I don't even want to put words in your mouth. How did you go? I will just ask it plainly. How did you go from a long-term relationship with a man to now being married to a woman and considering yourself no longer gay or bisexual?
Well, I guess maybe I'll just sort of put something out there. I guess to a certain extent, I would probably put out that I think everybody is bisexual. I think that sexuality is fluid. I've been saying that for years, and I think that I'm right about that. I'd love for someone to argue with me about that, but I just think that's the way that people are wired.
Well, let's pause there maybe before you answer. I think that when we talk about sexual fluidity, there's two ways it can be interpreted. Number one is the way that sometimes, for example, Brian Fisher talks about when I interview him, which is that individuals can change from being heterosexual to homosexual or bisexual. The other definition of fluidity would be that people are somewhere on a spectrum of sorts between gay and straight. And those are two very, very different things. The first one that I mentioned, which Brian Fisher likes, is used very often to push the idea that sexual orientation is a choice, and therefore it becomes very political because it's often used to try to limit rights. So I'm curious, which of the two meanings you're using?
I think for me, that's been part of my journey, has been to try to figure out, well, what is the truth? And is it about choice or is it about fluidity? And it's something that I know that for me, I've definitely, I guess to use a word that I don't even know if it's a word, but I've dogmatized myself, you know, by saying, well, because I've noticed in my own experience a fluidity, that must be, you know, the absolute way that it is.
So let's explore.
I think that's been an error.
So then if you can kind of give us the kind of relatively quick summary of how you went from a relationship with a man to marrying a woman.
You know, if I look back, I mean, you know, we had, Ben and I had a good and healthy relationship for the most part, but no relationship is perfect. I'm still, you know, I still honor him as a person, and called him recently to wish him well, and his mom just died, and there were a lot of stressors in our lives at that time. And, you know, one thing kind of leads to another. And I honestly don't think that it would be fair for me to go kind of beyond that at this point, because that's the most honest I can be at this point.
So what I'm hearing from you, we don't need to know specifically why the relationship ended, but more was the idea of how you went from someone who was co-founder of Young Gay America, advocate of gay rights, in a long-term and, as you describe, healthy relationship with someone that you still respect, to saying, you know, I'm no longer identifying as gay nor bisexual. I'm in a relationship with a woman. I'm now a Christian pastor. That's a big transition.
It is a big transition, and I'm not, you know, I'm not saying that's not the case, but, you know, just to try to be honest about it, you know, the different factors that were coming into play in my heart at that time, when now we're talking about 10 years ago, really, in a lot of ways, one of those factors was a spiritual search. You know, listeners are not a Christian, you know, just hear me out.
No, I understand that, but I think for the purposes of our conversation, was it the teachings of Jesus that suggested to you what you were doing was wrong?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So yes, in a sense, but no, in another sense. And I don't mean to be evasive, but let me just try to explain where I was at in 2003. In 2003, we were filming movies and doing media where we were going down to raise awareness for gay and lesbian and transgendered, queer, bisexual, questioning youth. And at that time, the enemy was right-wing Christianity, or all the politics and all of that. So for me, there was a sense in which I was definitely facing an enemy. And yet, at some point, that enemy started to touch my heart. Well, then I had my much publicized health scare, which was really just I had a lot of heart palpitations and anxiety. I feared for my life for the first time in my life. I feared death, really up close mortality sort of thoughts. And at that point, after finding out that I didn't have anything major, I went back home to my room and I said, "Thank you, God." And it was the first time in my entire life that I acknowledged God.
Yeah.
And I bought a Bible and I started reading it, and I resonated with the letters of Jesus Christ. I resonated with the words of Jesus Christ, the red letters. And I actually went to Ben and all the other folks and I was trying to tell them, this stuff is really good. It's like the best self-help book you'll ever find. And I was very kind of turned on by the words there in the Bible. Fast forward, now I'm questioning my own sexuality and wondering whether that has something to do with my dissatisfaction in my heart. I'm praying now to God for the first time, trying to figure out what He wants me to do. Fast forward about a year, I'm evolving in my thought process, if you want to call it evolving. I'm changing in my thought process yet again, to the point where I'm determining that God doesn't want me to be involved in homosexuality, and instead has shown me that my identity is not gay, but my identity is heterosexual. So I don't know if that answers your question completely.
Yeah, no, it really pretty does. It pretty much does. And, you know, we are kind of out of time. We did go over a little bit, and it's just a fascinating story. I'll give you, from an outsider's perspective, as someone who has interviewed people from all over the range of the both political and social spectrum, what I'm hearing from you is that you were clearly born bisexual. That's not something that has changed, but because of the influence that you attribute to Jesus Christ, who says that you shouldn't be gay, you've distanced yourself from that. But I think you're clearly a bisexual guy.
Well, I mean, you have the absolute freedom to analyze me in whatever way you'd like to do that. And I have no problem with that analysis. I have no problem with anybody's analysis of me. I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, look, this is not interesting to me. I know that right now in my life, this is not something I'm interested in, is homosexuality. It's not any part of my life.
No, no. Well, I want to be totally clear, Michael. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do anything, but what seems to me very clear is that your natural attraction was to both men and women, and now for religious reasons, as you said, God doesn't want you to be involved with homosexuality. But my question was one of your wife.
Yeah, no, that's a good analysis, but I wouldn't completely agree with you, but I respect your opinion.
Has your wife expressed or asked questions? Does she ask, are you still attracted to men? Is that a conversation you have?
Well, absolutely. We've been friends for 3 years, and we've talked about all this stuff, so absolutely, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, we've been speaking with Michael Glatz. He is a pastor in Wyoming. I think it's a fascinating conversation, and I can't thank you enough, Michael, for being on today.
Well, I'm grateful, and thank you very much.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Wayne LaPierre and the National Rifle Association have been saying that President Obama is going to sweep down and take everybody's guns since before he was even sworn in for his first term. Now, of course, this is already President Obama's 6th year in office. The number of guns that Obama has confiscated from law-abiding citizens during the first 5 years, it's somewhere around 0. There's a little bit of a margin of error there, but it's pretty close to 0. It's not stopping the NRA from continuing to preach that the president wants your guns. The Daily Caller, which is a right-wing website run by Tucker Carlson, put out a long, paranoid fundraising appeal that was disguised kind of as an editorial. And in it, the executive vice president of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre, says, 2014 could be remembered as the turning point in the loss of your Second Amendment rights. This year's elections will decide whether we stop the Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg gun ban machine and save the right to keep and bear arms, or lose much of our Second Amendment freedoms for generations to come. And it doesn't take long for him to connect that to giving the NRA more money. He says, so I urge you in the strongest possible terms to renew or upgrade your NRA membership today, because your NRA membership may be the only thing that can stop the Obama, Biden, Bloomberg gun ban bulldozer. President Obama is going to be out of office soon. He's really going to have to do the confiscation soon and quickly if he is really going to live up to this right-wing expectation, unless maybe if there's enough people who join the NRA, then that will keep President Obama at bay somehow.
Yeah, well, what they have to do is try and sell as many memberships and guns as possible, because there could be a Republican in office next time. And then this strategy won't really work. So
well, the other thing, Lewis, is that this appeal only works if people truly believe that what matters most to their happiness and security and development as people is the owning of guns. And unfortunately, it isn't. Now, fortunately for the NRA, a lot of people want to believe what Wayne LaPierre is saying. So this will probably be effective if more people realize that gun ownership does not lead to self-actualized and self-realized individuals. It really doesn't. And hopefully most people who are on this gun fetishizing side realize that before it's too late in their lives to really have missed the boat. But it really is sad. And the cries of Democrats are going to take your guns started at minimum, in other words, at least when Bill Clinton was in office. So we've had decades now of Democrats will take your gun stuff. And I don't know. When is President Obama going to start taking the guns? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe his last day in office. Maybe he's all just, I don't know. It would be quite the stunt, though, if you could pull it off this quickly.
Some presidents issue pardons on their last day in office. President Obama will just take people's guns. What will he do with them? I don't know, but he'll take them. A Florida man shot a passing 12-year-old and then immediately shot himself. A Florida man claims he was showing a friend how to clean a gun when he discharged the weapon and struck a 12-year-old girl who was inside of a passing car. Then he accidentally shot himself. This is 60-year-old Ventura Santos Mateo. He was in his garage on Friday when his gun safety demonstration went very, very wrong. He accidentally fired his pistol, which struck a 12-year-old girl in a passing car. The bullet went through the door and struck her in the right upper arm. He was so startled by the gunshot that he then, I don't know if fumbling the gun or somehow turning it towards himself, fired another bullet through his left thigh. The girl was treated at the hospital and is expected to recover. Mateo is going to be having surgery and is also expected to recover. Police haven't yet said whether they will be pressing any charges. From the headline, the way the headline was written, I thought maybe he killed the girl and then immediately killed himself because he felt so bad about it. That's not actually what happened. A more accurate image, what I have in my mind, you know when there's like a fire hose on the ground and the water's turned on and the fire hose is just flapping around uncontrollably, spraying water everywhere? That's what I imagine. This guy's holding the gun and gunshots are just going off uncontrollably.
Yeah, it seems to be what was happening here. It's like something out of a movie. It's completely ridiculous. And there needs to be a harsh sentence here, David. There needs to be.
Attempted murder, maybe? I mean, I don't know. And how come all of these responsible gun owners seem to constantly forget how to check that a gun is unloaded before doing these cleaning exercises where they're just showing the gun to people and showing people how clean it is and how they clean it, and it ends up being loaded?
Well, David, if most people are idiots, which I believe they are, that means most gun owners are idiots, which I believe they are.
Lewis believes something like 80% of people are not really qualified to do whatever job it is that they're doing, including parenting, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's go to your voicemails. Our voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is Old Man Mike talking about our KKK flag flyer from yesterday.
David Pakman, this is Old Man Mike. I just read your listened to your man flying KKK flag and news.
Yeah.
I tell you what, now you know why I left Florida. There's bunches of people like that. Las Vegas is much better. Washington State, I'm sure, is going to be thrilling. But you can keep the old South and the new South and any other part of the South that puts up rebel flags or KKK flags or any of that garbage, because we just don't need that in this country. Have a good day, man.
Old Man Mike, there he is, and also hearing from the Eggman, a lot of our regular callers lately.
Hey, Dave. Regarding Mr. Hayes, that racist guy in Boca Raton, hanging the KKK flag that says whites wanted, he said that whites work, both parents work, and they produce less white children, and because of interracial and gay marriages, that there's going to be less and less white children born each day.
Right.
He does have kind of a point there, except take away his racist idea there and put in liberals instead of whites, or atheists instead of whites. And the thing is, atheist families are working, and they're raising 1 or maybe 0 kids, and religious families are raising many, many kids. So even though we're progressing away from religion, religious families are making tons of babies, and we have to fight back, brother.
Yeah, he got cut off, but I think he was about to say, so Lewis and I need to start having tons of children. I think that's the direction he was going. Great bonus show planned for you today. DavidPakman.com/membership, or get the free t-shirt with membership. DavidPakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.